Hi, everyone. All right, so we are recording this session. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So I am adjusting it so that our speakers are actually presenters, so you can unmute and chat with us. So that'll slowly be happening as an FYI. So Nick and Ted, if you wanted to try to unmute now, that would probably work. And then it looked like Valerie was here for a second, but then dropped off. I know that a few teams have prior commitments today, and there's a religious holiday, and so we will work on setting up another date for feedback too. And so our current plan was let's keep the date that we have, which is on a number of people's calendars, but then due to the desire to have more people contribute, let's also make sure that there's an opportunity to do that in April. So that's our current plan. So Valerie, you should be good to go now. It was not anything you did, it was just your settings.
Thank you. I was very confused.
All right. Cool. Well, Trevor, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. I'm going to do my best. Oddly enough, as soon as this meeting was supposed to start, my internet went out.
That explains why it started and then stopped.
Yeah, but I think I've hotspotted into my phone, so I think I can share this here.
Worst comes to worst, drop me a link and I can share and poke for you.
Yep.
Good
Can you guys see what does it show up as? Cool, it's the actual presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Great. First thing I wanted to talk about was just team growth. So we have, oddly enough, not really seen that big of a dip from COVID in the state, which was something that was surprising to me. We seem to have gained teams throughout, though the growth rate did slow down. But starting this year, we have grown quite a bit. We ended up with, I think it's 84 teams now. With that, we've added 3 additional events. So we went from 6 qualifying events to 9. So a lot of growing pains in expanding that much, especially with a new PDO and PDP. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we try to work through all of the issues that come up with that. That being said, we are looking to add at least 20 additional teams next year. So we are going to run into some further growth challenges or further support challenges. I just wanted to highlight last year versus this year in terms of number of teams at each event, number of plays, what the advancement from each event was. So this is just a quick and dirty number of teams, number of advancement for those two things. I couldn't find the information for offered spots versus taken spots. So the only information I had for last season were spots taken, which were 144 plays for the 70 teams, which results in an average of 2.06 plays per team. This season, we offered 210 plays, but only 177 were taken. We had 84 teams, which means that there are 2.5 plays per team offered, but only 2.11 plays per team taken. So we use this data to kind of inform how many events we want to have coming up next year, because it's much easier to have one event for a team, but if teams are out here wanting 2 or 3 plays, we need to have more events to support that. I'm going to ask, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that our goal is for teams to ideally have a minimum of 2 plays so that they have that iterative design process. They're able to go to a live competition, have that experience, improve, and then go to another competition as well. So sorry, Trevor. Keep going.
Oh, no, you're all good. Those were the 2 main pieces of data that I wanted to talk about. And it seems like this meeting is a little smaller than I anticipated, so I don't know if I'm going to have particular answers to my questions, but I guess I would like to start it off with, do you guys have any questions looking at this data? Does anything stand out to you, those of you that are on the call?
Nick here. So I'd say one thing that stands out to me, the early tournaments are the ones that had teams drop. All the tournaments after Christmas were completely full. So the only reason, the only real reason Neo Titan ended up being substantially later in the end was because of moving it to Sunday and some teams dropped because of weather and stuff.
Yep. So a piece of information with that was we did have a number of teams want to move around towards the end of the season with, oh, we've qualified for state, we don't want to go. Oh, we have other teams that did want to go. So ultimately, there were a few spots in those later events that we could have accommodated more teams for if teams that dropped hadn't been holding on to those spots. So it gets a little more complicated. I do agree that a lot of the spots early in the season were left open, while towards the end of the season they are much more well occupied.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's important for our community to be aware that, like, we are seriously looking at mid-tier advancement opportunities. And so a group of, going from state championship to a region-oriented next tier of competition. And so there is a strong chance that as we continue to grow, we'll need to either maintain those November start dates or December events. And really make sure that teams are prepared to start their season at that earlier date, because we'll have to move the state championship back into February so that you are able to then advance to that regional championship or mid-tier advancement model, whichever they're calling it.
I think they're calling it not super regionals. I think that's as far as we've gotten.
Not quite as big as super regionals, yes.
Great. I think that's actually a great transition into my first question, which is, what do we as a state think is the ideal advancement to the state championship? I believe this year we had 28 teams out of the 84 that we have advanced to state, which is 33%, mm-hmm. which is higher than some of the other regions that we've had. Obviously, the higher that number is, the better, but there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. And in order to sustain the quality of the event or increase it, the smaller the event is, the more we can focus on the teams that are there. So does anyone here have an idea or a number that they would throw out for what seems like a good percentage or ratio?
Or even if you have experience in other regions and what sort of percentages you might see there.
Well, I don't know about percentages, but I feel like the number of teams that we had this year was somewhat necessary. I mean, the teams that made it to state qualified for good reason. So I feel like as long as we're qualifying teams that have potential to make it to Worlds, that's the best way to go.
Yeah. It just gets, as we get up here now, once we have, well, if we're shooting for around 100 teams next year, keeping mm-hmm. that same ratio would be a 35 or 33 team event. which once you get above 36, I think you require special permission from HQ to host a big event. And I don't think we as a state are equipped to deal with what that event would look like.
Right, and I think that's where if you have two, then you're going to be able to see that some of the teams that made it to the semis don't necessarily have the potential to make it to Worlds, so you could pare down at that point.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a little bit of confusion there. When Renee says mid-tier advancement model, what she means is after the state championship before Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm gunning really hard for us to be able to advance 8 teams to an event where we would have groups from like Iowa, Minnesota, various areas of the Midwest, where they would be able to have that level of competition. And then after that event qualifies teams to the first championship.
Oh, no, you're right. I was confused.
And so, but it does make sense, like what you're saying, if we had been talking about that, or if we had gotten to a point where we needed to make that adjustment. I agree that that would make sense. And so when I look at the percentages, I would want to stay between like the 33 and 25%. That feels like a good number, because I like multiple play options for teams.
Yeah.
And I, to be fair, I don't think there is a right answer to this. It's kind of just hard, and we're just trying to plan.
Divisible by 4. Oh, my 6. Divisible by the judging panels.
Yes.
Oh, see, divisible by 4 is what my number is.
Also divisible by the judging panels, though, based on the 4 rooms that we have. So we would love to stay at MSOE for this upcoming season. With that in mind, one of the things that we'd like to consider is adjusting the state championship so that we would have judging like start on Friday. So find a way to balance the schedule, so that we're able to really capitalize on making sure that you have your matches, the judging is, completed, leverage as much space as possible, and then judges can go into deliberations, ideally starting on Saturday.
I think that would also.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ted.
I just keep in mind, it's great for the Milwaukee teams, which I realize this is a program based in Milwaukee, but it probably means an overnight stay for outstate teams, and an extra expense, where it's not practical to go back and forth. So I would just ask that be considered. It's not just Milwaukee focused as you think about that.
Fully agree. What is your experience in Minnesota? Did they typically, like, from what I remember years and ages ago, is that they did have opportunities for Friday night judging leading into Saturday events, meaning their events were they had more playtime.
Yeah, so in Minnesota, at least in my experience, they usually have 48 teams at the state competition, which does necessitate a Friday judging period. And that is like Wisconsin, that is a very Twin Cities focused program, but there are teams far west, far north. And again, I'm not saying that you can't do it because other states do. You have to do something. But with 48 teams, it's just not realistic to get through all of them in one day. And also the judges there, it does free you to have coaches or people associated with teams do the Friday night judging because they can avoid conflicts, but then they don't show up for the Saturday judging panels for the awards. So they can have more judges get through more rooms the Friday night. And then it's people who don't have conflicts of interest on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. That's helpful to know. I think my other comment is, while we're currently Milwaukee centric, which is where like a large population of our teams are, I definitely understand that there's a pain point there, but I think the experience ultimately would be better if we weren't pushing all of the judging into the morning and making it such a long day. And so I hear what you're saying. We're going to take note of it and keep it in mind. I also just want to make sure that you, like, if we look at this, would it then make sense to, in the future, as we continue to grow, instead of having it consistently in like the greater Milwaukee area, would it make sense to like move it to different locations to try and spread out the travel related costs? I don't know. Some ideas.
Yep.
You could
Yeah,
host it.
I think
Sorry.
you're going to have travel anyway with the morning judging. A lot of teams want to be fresh for that, so they're traveling. I think it puts a strain on some judges, but most will like it. We've done it that way because of necessity previously, either for COVID, or I know we've had a couple of events even pre-COVID that we did the Friday, and we did Dean's List judging on Friday night and then had the event on Saturday. So I think if you could use a virtual judging if necessary, like if we had that as a, gosh, there's just no other way, we can only do it virtually on Friday night, but Saturday have all be in person, that would be an option. But I think just based on, like I said, the competition has accelerated to the point where there's a lot of teams that could have easily represented us at Worlds, and I would have been proud to send them. So it's just a lot to cram into judges' brains, that we're looking at every aspect, and then we're going out pit judging, and pit judging just could not be done to the capacity that we would have preferred it, having everything on the one day. So I feel like it would enhance the ability for judges to get more information and really be able to go out and talk to every team that they want to talk to.
It would also give us an opportunity to expand play a little bit. I would love to do 6 matches at our state championship. And if we can have more time for matches, that becomes possible.
Right. So bottom line, I would love to see it done, and that. Of
Great.
course, I would also like to see then judging not start till 10 on Saturday, like we do it Friday night, and then judges come in at 10 and start pit judging.
Yeah. I don't see any reason why not. If we get through the vast majority or all of the judging interviews Friday night.
Yeah, because suddenly judging will be incredibly popular.
Judges could even kind of submit their notes a little bit, so that the other judges kind of have an idea of why they are nominating certain teams. Because at this point, we've nominated them. And then we talk about during deliberation the whys, but we could have that before the pit judges go out, and that would be helpful.
Understood. I did see Jane has a question. Oh, Jane has a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, to try this out, I mean, couldn't we, I understand the majority of the teams are in Milwaukee, but there's other teams that are not. Couldn't we, like on that Friday night, ask for teams to volunteer to be judged on Friday afternoon, Friday evening? Maybe we don't get all of them, but if we got the majority of them, it would shorten up our interview time Saturday morning. Kind of like, how we did in COVID. We judged some things, well, because it was all virtual then. We judged some things the night before, so that Saturday we didn't have as much to do. I mean, interview wise. So I understand it's, for some people have to travel further than others, but then, maybe ask the local people if they would, if they could be judged on Friday. And maybe the few teams that come from far away, judge them quick Saturday morning and then get on with it. And also like Dean's List, that probably a lot of that could be done on Friday night as well.
All of our Dean's List was done virtually ahead of time, which worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I like having the Dean's List so
Yeah.
that there's plenty of time for them to write up, because I've done it at state and that was hard.
Mhm.
Because the write-ups take a lot of brain power. Like, you'd have to have just Dean's List judges if you did it during state.
So, and Jane, I think that that's a really good idea. It's almost like a hybrid of the two concepts. I think my only concern, or like kind of red flag that comes into mind, would be asking Valerie if it's okay that there would be the evening judging and then the morning judging. Like there'd kind of be that break. I don't know if you want them all in a like solid straight line or if it can be split up.
Can't give you my answer right this minute. Like, I can see some positives and some negatives.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams might not think that's fair and equitable. It might be difficult for judges then, because then you're kind of doing both. I don't know.
Yep. Think
Ponder.
about it. But no, that's good. I mean, and that's why we're having this discussion, is we're trying to get feedback, brainstorm different ideas. While Trevor and I are absolutely perfectly brilliant and know everything about the program, and there's nothing we could learn from anyone else. Yeah, no, all of that's not true. Like, we would love to get your feedback, your input, and use your expertise in the program in order to make this even better for our students.
The other piece that I'm thinking about here is last year when we had state up in Green Bay, I heard a lot of negative feedback from volunteers as to the distance that it was away from people. But talking to teams, there were a number of them that enjoyed the excuse to go get a hotel and stay overnight. And I understand that is coming from a place of privilege for these teams. But it's more complicated than just travel bad.
I will say,
right.
though, that the Green Bay facility, the judging rooms were awful.
Oh.
We were stuck in locker rooms that had no room at all, and it was just awful.
We'll work on
Whereas the place for the robot matches was amazing. So
valid. All right. So we've had a couple more people join. Just to give you a heads up on where we're at, Trevor has a few questions. Again, we're collecting feedback and just getting opinions about our last season. Something I would love to know from the coaches is how much did you like the level of communication we had? How much more communication do you need? Would you like? And then also, do you have any, is there any type of information you could use ahead of time, or like split up information so that you're able to make like travel plans earlier, but then detailed event schedules don't need to be released until X, Y, and Z time? Those are the hard-hitting questions I'd love to know. Unless Trevor has another question he brought up because I accidentally jumped ahead, Trevor.
I mean,
That's fair.
I can just send most of these out in it.
Trevor, you're going in and out. Do you want to turn off your video and see if that helps with your internet connection? Dun, dun, dun.
Hi, is that
Yes. I can hear you now.
cool?
Good.
I can send most of these out, as we don't have that much representation on this call to get answers to things like how many plays do you want. I don't think it is that well suited to an audience of 4. So I'll send out a survey to teams afterwards with some of these.
Okay, we're up to
but-
6, Trevor.
Oh, 6. Great.
And we're doing another
Um,
one, remember? Because
And
there's
we're
a
doing
holiday.
another one.
Yep.
I hear you.
Okay.
This is the big one that's been on my mind. Going from 6 events to 9 events for qualification this year was hard. It was a lot of weekends for both our volunteer pool and for me. So I am trying to come up with ways that we can try to minimize the number of weekends that we are going if we have to do 9 or 10 events this coming year. So I wanted to pitch the idea of having a like back-to-back Saturday Sunday event with completely different teams where you try to keep the volunteers come to both of them and then minimizing the teardown. So ideally it'd be in the same venue, same gym. You come in, you play one event, you hopefully get done at a reasonable time. You come in the next day and then you do it all again with different teams. I think this would be a good way to kind of minimize the amount of strain that's on some of our key volunteers.
This is
But
Chad. In Minnesota, that's how they do it. So I've years of experience with that, and I think it's great. It's a lot easier. People, usually they set up Friday night, they can go all day Saturday, and then tear down Sunday evening.
Yep.
Of course, it's venue dependent if they can get in the venue and use it that way.
Yep. The other benefit that I see to something like this is if we can get some of the volunteers to come to both of them, it provides a good opportunity for post-event events where you can hang out and do some of that community building. That seems like a really big win to me.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is this doesn't come without costs. Like it's going to be a challenge, I think, it's easier to convince someone to come to one event than 2. So we need to come up with some sort of a game plan to help incentivize people coming to both. Or even if it's just a different set of volunteers, that's fine too. But I'm trying to not have all winter, every weekend be robots.
Yeah, I do think the challenge you have with the back-to-back event is if it's a 24-team events,
Yep.
half of the teams are going to be in one of the 2. And so then you end up with either conflicts one of the 2 days for a lot of the volunteers that are associated with some of the teams.
I wonder if you could like partner with another team and just work with your school district. So whatever team has the contact with the school district can be like a primary, secondary kind of thing. So the second team could host the second event, even though it's in the same venue. I wonder if that would help alleviate some of the conflict, because I also understand that giving up a full weekend is challenging.
I was just also thinking from my perspective, if that's 2 of the 9 events, it's a decent chance that my team is in one of them. And as a mentor for the team that day, I want to be with my team.
Yeah. That is certainly a challenge of it.
The question is, do we really need the 9 events? Because if you look at what happened, there were several events with less than 16 teams or 18 teams. And every event had less than 24 teams, or that 1 or 2. So should we just have 24 team events, maybe 6 of them, and that way, reduce the pressure on everybody?
Nope. So Trevor, you can go back to the percentages. That'd be really good. So we'll be starting 20 rookie teams next year with the Google grant. If we estimate the number of plays and you look at the projection of having 100 teams and we provide like the total number of plays available would be 210, that still puts us at needing 9 events. So we wouldn't be able to go back to 6. We would still need that number.
This level of growth does come with certainly a number of challenges. But yeah, to go backing further, we've continually seen growth within the state, and if we're targeting 100 or 104 teams next year, that's a lot of plays to have to make up for.
And so we would essentially, if you have 9 events at 24 teams each, you would go to 216 spots.
Well, my input is, again, maybe I'm just old. I feel like I would be completely exhausted by the end of 2 days being judge advisor of 24 different teams. I don't know. So that's my only drawback on that. Doing Saturday and then doing Sunday again. I think that would be a lot.
I agree.
Would love to hear what Ted has to say about that.
I would say it seems that we're going to have, no matter what happens, we're going to have a volunteer problem. It's the number of judge advisors, it's a number of judges, number of referees. It sounds like we're going to have a volunteer problem with this growth. So I'm gonna for those of you who know this, but those who don't, I'm from Minnesota. I spent most of my FTC time in Minnesota, so I'm very familiar with that program. They have 2 judge advisors Saturday, Sunday. Usually it's completely different judges. Sometimes people can devote the whole weekend, and they do, but usually it's different judges, different referees, and there are some very dedicated people who are there every single time, absolutely. But it does change, and for the very reason that I think it was Nick was saying, if my team is playing on Saturday, I can't do anything on Saturday, but maybe I can on Sunday, and so there is a shift that has to happen. And again, I'll just remind, not all FTC teams are in school districts with multiple teams at the district. Some of us are community individual teams, and there are no options. If I'm not there as a coach, the team doesn't have a coach. So we can't make a decision to not to volunteer and not coach. So again, I think just the problem that we're going to have is volunteers. And as we grow Google and the Google teams and the growth in the state, which is fantastic, I think part of the problem is we're going to have to grow the volunteers. And the new teams are probably not necessarily going to be supplying a lot of volunteers if the individuals, the adults involved, are not familiar and they're not going to feel confident in volunteering, even though I would argue it's a fantastic way to learn what the heck this is all about. One thing, again, another opportunity is to have volunteer awards or some way to honor volunteers at state or in some way to help encourage more volunteerism among the teams and the community.
What is High Tech Kids?
I was just going to say there are 2 programs that have pretty large, amount of teams. Like Brookfield could definitely, so you could do it like maybe 2 weekends, have a Saturday, Sunday, just to start, put our toes in the water next year, because isn't it Lakeshore that has quite a few teams? And then Brookfield has quite a few teams. So you could do it for those 2 areas to see how it works. And then do the others as single. The Madison one, keep it single for a while, and
just for a little background, FLL has done Saturday, Sunday tournaments for quite a few years now. and they keep doing them. So I'm guessing, well, I've judged at some of those. Some of the judges judge Saturday and Sunday. Some just judge one day over the other, depending on schedules and where they live, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, FLL has done it for years and they keep doing it. So it must be, I know Marquette does a Saturday, Sunday, and I think maybe Lakeshore does a Saturday, Sunday. And it works for them. And I agree. It's, if you look at the FLL and FTC schedule, especially for volunteers, there's multiple events like every weekend. And like some of us judges that judge both, we have to choose. Can I judge FLL this weekend or should I do FTC? So having two on one weekend, I think we could try it. Did like Valerie said, in one or two locations and see what happens. I mean, for the field crew, I would think they would love it because it's one less takedown and one less setup. You know, it's time efficient for the people setting up and taking down the field and preparing the venue.
Mm-hmm.
Another option is to go do the 2-day thing with 32 or 36 teams and do judging previous night for lesser number of events. That way, you could do 7 events like that and get still more than 215 slots.
Are you okay with, so thinking about that, we have a venue. We essentially had standing room only with 28 teams at the FTC state championship. One of the ways we can relieve that is by having our secondary projector and screen up in the other gym area to try and help pull like parents and other supporters over into that area to free up some room. But we are quickly running into a capacity issue, making the state championship larger. And so is it okay that the state championship has fewer number of teams compared to these larger qualifying tournaments we're talking about?
If the qualifying, so going back to the state championship with this year's 28 teams and doing everything in a single day, I think judging suffered that the judges did not get enough time with the pit judging. So pit judging was very limited, and it was honestly disappointing that many teams did not get any pit judges, and it was completely because of time availability. To avoid that, a 2-day option is possible. And if a 2-day option is possible, we could still make the state championship to a 32-team state championship too.
So physically, we have limitations on our ability to add more pits unless
Well, I was going to suggest moving the match, the set upstairs in the gym that they use for practice matches. Because wasn't that in the pit area, the practice field?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
because the upstairs gym was underutilized. I went up there to do stuff because there was nobody else up there. So if the practice field was up there, then you'd have more room for teams.
That's true.
Yeah, and
I think you run into a little bit.
We had the pits upstairs, and that was perfectly fine because everybody got like very large pits. We didn't have. I don't know whether we had a separate lunch space, but we had the pits upstairs, and that was perfectly fine too.
Was there any issues with how few and far between the elevators are?
I think it was figured out. I mean, the tournament went smooth. I think it sort of figured out by itself.
So, Trevor, everyone gets a cure. Keep them on track.
Oh, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of food to provide. That's a lot of volunteer T-shirts.
It is.
I don't think it was like that.
Yeah, I know we've had the pits upstairs previously, like he was saying, That's why I didn't actually kind of suggest that, because I like the idea of the pits being right by the match fields, but the practice fields take up a lot of space. And anything else, like really getting it across to teams that they definitely should use that area for snacking and hanging out, I think would help too.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm not
for
sure you
normal
could get much more than 2 more pits if you took out the practice fields. Like even just from a pure square footage point of view, they're what, 12 by 12, and the pits were 8 by 8. So
Yep.
at most, that's three additional pits.
Yeah.
The pits were 10 by 10, Trevor.
This year they were 8 by 8.
No, it was 10 by 10 because we built structures for 8 by 8 and ended up having 2 feet on either side.
Well then, that's a surprise. Trevor, did we measure?
I didn't measure. I just trusted that the people that set it up did it right.
Well, I love that. Okay, so then can I give you 8 by 8 pits?
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Okay. Marianne.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the practice fields being upstairs, far away from the competition. I think at the state level, the teams use that time not to practice and improve their robot, but to actually coordinate with their alliance between matches. So if we're not going to be able to have access to that, I think the quality of the games are going to completely suffer, because we were practicing, okay, who goes first, let's try the different autonomous until we honed it, and then the kids went on to the match. So by losing that piece of the puzzle, I guess that's very dependent on what next year's challenge is going to be, but if it needs as much coordination as this year's, that might be a mistake to keep it away from the matches.
Okay, so definitely things to consider, but it's giving us a lot of different levers to potentially pull. So this is really good feedback. Thank you, everyone. Trevor, did you have more questions we wanted to get into? Oh yeah.
Mostly just that, given the growth that we're seeing, I think not necessarily next year, but within the next 2 or 3 years, we definitely need to start considering league play. And maybe we try to start not next year, but the following year, a pilot league in the Milwaukee area. Because once you cross over that 100-team threshold, you should have enough teams to sustain leagues. But I don't know what the preferred model of competition is. So if anyone has opinions.
What is league play?
League play would be having 12 team leagues that attend 2, ideally 3 events that is just matches at the same spot. And then after that, I believe it's the highest, no, it's all of them, go to a league championship. So essentially, it's just giving the opportunity for additional plays without judging, while decreasing the amount of overhead that's required for an event.
This is Ted again. Having experienced them, I have strong feelings, but obviously, if teams are interested, they should be allowed to pursue it. I wouldn't prevent other teams, but I do have strong feelings, and I think it really focuses on robot over awards and other aspects. And I would, having been at the league qualifier in Minnesota, the volunteers who work all qualifiers, there was a lot of conversation about the difference of quality, a lower quality at the league qualifier versus the other qualifiers. of the robot and judging. So I again, I have strong feelings. Obviously, if Wisconsin First and teams want to pursue it, of course they are free to do that. I'm not convinced that it's as great as First wants it to be.
So Ted, so here's a couple questions since in Indiana I was very familiar with the league play model. If we prioritize like our own localized awards and did have some type of judging process, even if it was just pit judging with the teams at one event, maybe interviews at the next event, like again, trying to keep it within that set time frame that we're looking for, and maybe, encouraging something like 8 judges or 4 judges to engage, and having it be, again, not official to FTC, but something that like we're awarding, like the Gracious Professionalism Award, insert name of made up award here, that's still meaningful. Do you think that that would help avoid some of the issues associated with like not understanding the culture of First, like from that balancing awards and robot side? What do you think?
It may. When I was involved in leagues, we actually did, instead of pit judging, we did room judging as practice, and we told them this is practice. There was no award, there was no consequence, no benefit either, but it was just practice. And so I think that helps. I would say the discussion this year, and maybe this is coming out of COVID and the weirdness of all that. The top teams thought they were fantastic because their frame of reference were the other teams in their league, and that's it. They weren't seeing the teams in the other qualifiers, where those teams that go to the first qualifier and say, I have a great robot, holy cow, that team, those 5 teams are amazing. Whoa, I got to step back and go to my next qualifier with a whole different mindset. The league teams were just seeing the same robots developing slowly, and from their perspective, they're fantastic, or they're doing well, but then they get to state and they're blown away because the other teams have been going through 2 or 3 qualifiers and have seen the other teams at state. And so they're really pushing further. And so it just, the robot competition quality and judging it was completely different compared to a qualifier. Again, maybe that's unique, I don't know, but just that was my latest interaction with leagues, and I've had previous interactions, and I'm not convinced it does what First hopes it does.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, so besides the people that have experienced leagues before, for those who have heard about leagues, what are your thoughts?
So I guess I started reading a little bit about it and kind of hearing a little bit from a league play perspective. And part of what I struggled with looking at a place like Illinois, it's very geographic based. And if a league is 12 teams and a high school has 6, how does that work? Because it looked like in the Illinois model, only 1 or 2 leagues would then get to have a tournament that would advance a couple of teams. And if you've got 6 teams from one high school that qualified for state, but only 2 qualify out of a league, I think you end up with, I struggle to see how the leagues could be comparable playing quality.
Okay. I think that I don't know if the population we would be looking to serve is currently the population like on this call in discussions. As an example, I could see like MSOE being an incredible league host with like 3 to 4 events for 12 to 24 teams, depending on how they want to structure it, and then hosting a league championship at some point in that like end of January, beginning of February timeframe, leading into then our state championship somewhere else in February. And so I feel like there's definitely ways it could work, but that doesn't necessarily mean like the highly competitive teams in qualifying tournament play are the ones that we're looking to engage with it. I don't know. Something to think about.
Okay, so that's my misunderstanding of it. I thought that eventually the league play became an all or nothing, from what I looked at with a few other states.
I mean, yeah, you can definitely look at it, but I would not recommend that.
And so that was my reservation. If it was all or nothing, that eventually the model 3-4 years from now is everyone's a league, and every league gets 2 teams that make it to the state qualifying tournament or something.
Unless we have like hugely explosive growth and then have to like essentially regionalize, like it's kind of like what Texas does in terms of building out those teams in that volunteer group. I think a hybrid model, especially with Wisconsin, the geographic distance between our population centers, et cetera, would make a lot more sense. But Iowa did do it, and Trevor could probably talk more about what that looked like. So maybe it is possible, but it would also take like double the number of teams that we are projected to have next year.
Yeah, it would take a lot of teams to do it. The benefit was you wouldn't want to, but you can run a league meet with 4 volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
That even though there's more events, it also encourages like more regular volunteering at those events to start to build that community.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're more frequent, I guess it's kind of a moot point when we have 5 or 6 of our events in Milwaukee back to back. But it just kind of, it's a less intimidating space to come into as a volunteer, I think.
Okay. Well, good news. Everyone can brush up on your league knowledge before our next call, because we'll be doing one more of these since there's a holiday today that we, Trevor and I missed. And so we wanted to make sure that people could attend and listen in. And we will be doing another one of these in, I think, I don't know however many weeks Trevor says.
Some.
Do you want to have it before champs or after champs?
Probably the week before champs.
Okay.
Would
If we
be
did
my
after
guess.
champs, we could like chat about the fun, adventurous things that they announced at the championship.
We can do it the week after champs too. That's fine.
Does anyone have on this call currently have a preference? / will you show up again? Valerie's like, no. No, just kidding.
We always show up.
Oh, thank you. That was sweet. Okay.
Though, thankfully,
yeah.
I am done. I don't have any more questions.
So I think we want to definitely hear from all of you. Was one of the things I talked to Trevor about was like, I want to know how the season could have been even better if X, Y, and Z thing had happened. And so, Ted, you say that, and I don't know if I agree, but that's fine.
Might have been a little sarcastic.
Okay, thank you.
It would have been better for me if we could send 4 teams to Worlds.
That's fair. That's fair. Which is again why I am a strong advocate of mid-tier advancement, to the point that I just colored in like a map of the United States and color coded it and was like, poke holes in this, people from FTC, like have a conversation about it. So we're at least continually advancing the conversation.
Okay.
So I agree that would be an even better if. That would be excellent. I feel like it would be even better if like a bunch of alumni would come back and volunteer, and we had like a stronger alumni base to pull from. It'd be even better if we had more AV directors, everybody. That would make our life a lot easier.
Yes.
So that's
I mean,
framework. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is vital that we find a way to not lose our alumni as they go off to college to different regions, because it's easy to go off to school, not get involved with FIRST, and then fall away from the program. Whereas if you can keep people involved throughout, you have a much higher chance of retaining them.
Well, I know my son got one of his alumni, like he voluntold him, and then he ended up at a qualifier and at state and loved it. And I know he'll be back next year. And it was just getting him to come and not feel like, oh, I'm not sure I can do this, you know. So I think coming from that generation, like, I was like, okay, you invited one person. Now next year you need to invite two, and they need to invite somebody. Because it's one thing for me to say it; it's another thing for their friends to be like, hey, come do this with me.
I would just add a session to, I don't know how to enforce it, but have the coaches be engaged in more common conversations like what we are having right now. Make it somehow mandatory, or give a score, maybe a badge for every team, saying how many events have you volunteered, has your team volunteered, or how many events have your coaches become judges. It would certainly be more effective to have the coaches be judges, both for them to learn what happens, and also since their familiarity with the program and the nuances is much higher than judges who are seeing it for the first time or are just seeing it at the state, right? That would help enhance the quality and credibility of the program.
Mm-hmm. I think it would also be like the season would have been even better if we had more Promote and Compass Award judging, like submissions. And I don't know if necessarily that should be at state or if it should go back to qualifying tournaments, but I would love to get your thoughts about that.
One of the thoughts I had is if you could, at each qualifier, have two submissions go through to state. Like, they don't win, but they get to go through to state. And that way we'd have them at each qualifier. And hopefully the teams at that qualifier would be excited to do that. It might also be a way if a team knows that their team might win Compass or might win Promote, they didn't make it to state, but now they're going to volunteer because they want to be there.
These are excellent points. I've often been known to tell First HQ that they need to let me do a second round of Dean's List interviews. Like, I will figure it out. We will be able to like go through the top group, get to the final 6 to 8 kids, 10 kids, whatever it would be, and then do a second round of interviews. And they have told me no year after year, and every year I bring it back up. And so I would love it to know if that is even an option. I mean, everything's optional with Promote and Compass, so like, why not?
Yeah.
I said, I think that would set a competition to have it, and every team would have something. And also, we should display these. I think we had a lot of Promote and Compass videos at the state championship. We should just play it so that people see it, and that'll make it interesting for teams to have it also.
Oh, that's a great point. And also, we should promote them on social media. I'm gonna go send Kayla a note.
Absolutely, because I mean, I got to watch all of them, and I enjoyed. I mean, all of them had nuggets. So to get teams to go, oh yeah, we could do that. That doesn't look so scary. Also, kind of let teams know, especially at the state level, it could come into play on, and which teams win the competition. Did you do a promote and did you do that extra step?
I think that's a really good thing to like tell and explain and talk to our teams about that. Like, it is a good thing to do those promote and compass awards, and to like it differentiates you from teams. And so we should see everyone doing it.
I would say too, just to kind of help teams realize it's not supposed to be super serious. It's supposed to be fun and lighthearted. So this is the opportunity where the kids really can, the crazy kid that maybe can't focus on doing all the drive team and all that, they can have fun with this. Because they're supposed to be like little commercials of goofiness. So.
The one good thing, is real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that I did request like that the teams who are submitting people tell me what companies they worked for, and if we could tag them on social media. And so we do have all of that information, and I will admit we got promptly distracted by the continuation of the first overall season. But I have made a note for us to continue to promote those as we get closer to champs. Ted, what were you going to say?
I think for the teams who want to submit videos, I know my team was pretty disappointed they could only do it at state and not do it and not submit at qualifiers. I don't know if kind of collecting it at qualifiers for state really solves that problem necessarily, although it would inspire them to move faster and then not do it the week before, finish it the week before state. But there was disappointment that it wasn't a qualifier thing. And I think that kind of undermotivated, at least for a couple of people on my team. So having it linked to qualifiers, I think, just helps.
That makes sense. That was a 100% a Renee coming from league play and being like, "What do you mean, compass and promote? Like, that's at the next tier." Wait a second, these are qualifying tournaments, Renee. So that was my mistake. We can fix that for next year. Trevor, does that sound good? Can we just throw more trophies at it?
You give me more money. We need more money for more trophies.
Okay.
I will say though, if we're going to do it at qualifiers, I think we need to absolutely make sure all the teams know, and that don't submit the same one at multiple qualifiers. If you can do, maybe not so much for the promote, but the compass, if you can do different mentors. Because if we only have a few teams do it, then by default we have to pick. I mean, if every team did it, it would be fine to submit the same one. But what happened last year when we had them at all the qualifiers, we had to, by default, have different people win at different events just because it was the same mentor, or it's, and so you don't want that. I mean, it worked out fine because we had enough that we didn't feel like we were putting something through that wasn't valid. But it would be great to be able to recognize a lot more mentors. I would love to see that.
I mean, if there's nothing against it, then the team submitting mentors, a different mentor each event sounds great. Can they all go into the pool for consideration then at the state championship?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of cool. Like, that you win the state. It's not quite Woody Flowers, but it's on the same vein.
Okay, we can make our own thing.
Yeah.
It should be like Woody Flowers, in my opinion.
Well, it would be, but
yes.
I mean, then we have to make sure that all the FTC teams around the world see how awesome it is and they do it too.
Okay, well, good news. Very good at that. So we will get that done. All right. Other questions, comments?
I think the communication could be improved. And I know there was some illness and other things going on in personal lives this year. But as a team, there were a lot of times where we were left in the dark and promised information didn't come, and it was hard to connect and get answers. So I think more and timely, earlier is better always, I think, even if you have to repeat yourself. But I think there's a lot of communication breakdowns that happened this season, or several, I should say.
No, that's super helpful. So as a question, so first, one of the things I'd like to do is for each of the qualifying tournaments, they would have a unique page on our website where teams would be able to go find information. And if that means, giving tournament directors or a designated person the tournament director tells me to be the one who can access that page on the website and provide the updates, that's great. So that's one potential idea to make, this season even better / next season amazing. And then Ted, my question would be how, once teams are set into their events, and we kind of have all of our processes figured out, which Trevor and I have had many discussions about ways to make that more effective. Once you sign up for your event and you get the information, is it helpful to get the this is the time you should plan on arriving, this is the time that we would expect the event to be concluded at, we will provide a more detailed event schedule closer to the event, so you get a bunch of information in October and then you get additional information how early before the event are you getting more information, and then the week of the event?
Yeah, so I mean, at least in my team, we have lots of families, lots of kids, lots of schedule, and so the more information we have about, at least loose, and again, not 12, 15 lunch starts. We know we're not going to get that level of information. We know the date, we know the place probably because we signed up for it. But again, just any sort of hey, we expect to doors open at 7:30. That just helps us get that in front of our parents earlier, because again, as people who normally have to travel, that's planning that families have to do, and so that level of information is really helpful. Understanding the details aren't going to be there right away, but again, 2 weeks out, we really are looking for those details, because again, we're trying to plan families and who's going to be there.
Gotcha. So it's okay to send a vague event schedule and say this is a block of judging time. But then for the detailed event schedule, if that needs to be finished and finalized the week of the event, that's okay. Is that
week of the event being Monday? Yes. I mean, if it's Thursday, then it was creating a little panic.
No. So I mean, you would why does the judging?
Well, because if we're going to be at, doors open at 7:00, judging starts at 8, and we're 8:00, and we're an hour away, we need to know that. And that might mean, and for our practice periods and communication, it's coordination of these kids are going to go with this person. It's transportation coordination. Again, we're not school. We're not doing a school bus. Mm-hmm. We're doing family transportation. So it's helpful for us to know what we need, when we need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, and I can see why your parents, but shouldn't we just have the expectation that if judging starts at 8, all teams are required to be there at 8?
Yeah, because we need to make sure that all of the notebooks are collected, and yeah.
And
because otherwise the judges can't get them.
We just have a Wisconsin schedule, because I had to fight at every qualifier. This is the schedule I would like to use, because I wanted it the same at every qualifier. Why can't we just say this is the schedule?
We will. Period.
Okay.
My intention this coming year is to have a standard schedule and standard expectations for events.
Then teams know this is check-in means our engineering portfolio has to be there because the judges need it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess thank you, Val, for mentioning that. I think that's what I'm responding to is that the schedules were different at different events, and so we don't really know, or are we supposed to be there at 7 or 8? I don't know. It depended on the event, and so if there's a standard schedule, if we know what to expect, that's fine and great, and that solves the problem.
Yeah, I would
So,
love that.
Yeah,
'Cause
I would
do
too.
like to know ahead of time. And I will say, as the judge advisor, and I might not be at every event every time, but whoever is the judge advisor should get the team information and the judge information as same as the event coordinator. So when the event coordinator gets it, whoever is the judge advisor should get it too. I usually ask the event person, and they were very good about getting it to me as soon as they could. But it's just helpful to have that because I know when I'm the JA, I contact all my judges Monday, Wednesday or Thursday, and then Friday night.
With that in mind, what do you think about one of the things I'd really like to do in order to build up our volunteer base is separate the role of like the tournament director, aka like the event manager, the people who are kind of connecting all the dots and managing their committee meetings, and a volunteer coordinator, so that those people who are designated as volunteer coordinators are able to get training on the VMS system, understand like what to look for and how, and those sort of like fun and exciting things. I wanted to get your thoughts about that idea.
I think that would be a great idea for consistency, especially like with the traveling judge station. We had a lot of things that were done twice that didn't need to be. We did like sort of convey, like I said, I get in contact with whoever's doing the event right away. But if you have different JAs at different events, they're not going to know to do that. So if you just say, hey, this is already in, if you have a coordinator, they'll know. We already have copies of this, and we already killed this many trees. And so.
Understood. Yes. It'd be even better if we could kill fewer trees. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
The paper airplanes did not help.
But they were fun.
They were fun. They were very fun.
The the separation of tournament director and volunteer coordinator, there are many more people who are involved from a host, the adults, to run something. And at least in my case, what happened is we did have them separate roles, but we sort of separated it towards the end only as we needed all the adults to get engaged. We have a template by now by which we are able to do that only at the last minute. Last couple of days is when we need 2 or 3 people involved in that kind of a role per se. Before that, just me managing was good enough.
Yeah.
That way we don't have to engage a lot more people. Again, time and training and availability and all is an issue.
I don't know. I feel like the more I can build all of you up into these like cohorts of people that have these skill sets, the easier it will be to grow access to the first program overall, and make sure that there are more people on these calls who are not all the same people over and over again.
Yeah, that's where you need to give the badging thing and make that a thing for judging as well. Saying the more badges your team has, you get a brownie point.
Or like, I don't know, we could do like a 3D printed thing that's like, oh, you volunteered. Here's, let's see, what did my dad call it? He called them like attaboys or something. Maybe it was like, non-genderfied, but like, a like good job thing. And then once you got beyond like 10 of the good job items, you got like a bigger keychain that said, you know, superstar or something like that. So that was kind of his funny way of like keeping track of it, but then also incentivizing people to keep those and collect them. I did try eventually, like once I sent out the checks for every event, I did include like a little letter for each of the teams who were able to host, documenting like the number of volunteers, etc. And so maybe that's something we need to stress to our teams a little bit more and to the judges about, you know, asking questions related to volunteerism. I don't know. I defer to Valerie.
Something that judges want to hear about, and the team should, like, if you have 20 volunteers and they all volunteered 8 hours, you should multiply that and be like, we volunteered as a team this many hours. That definitely is something that should come up in judges.
Okay.
But I
All
think
right.
consistency for all the qualifiers would be the key. Same schedule, same ideas of this is when you turn in your portfolio, this is when you have to have your robot checked. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
The other thing, and I brought this up before, I think just being clear early on with all teams about what the rules are for that season. Are we handing in the portfolio and the notebook? Is the notebook optional? Is it actually a hidden requirement or not optional? Just being really honest and upfront with teams about what rules are going to be in play. And I don't, states programs are allowed to adjust rules, and I know that. Just communicate openly and for all teams, and not at small events like this.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Do you have examples?
Again, the notebook thing, I've talked about that for a couple of years. It's optional, but is it optional?
Yes.
So I think
it's exactly how the judge manual that you guys all got a copy of. All the teams got that copy. It has defined in that is exactly how it is. They show up in the judge room. If there is 2 teams that are super, super close for Inspire, then we might look at them. Otherwise, they're probably not looked at. But if you make it to state and you have one, you should bring it. But it is not counted against you. If your portfolio is amazing, you don't need a notebook.
Okay, so that needs to be clear. We will make that clear. And if there is any other examples that you have that you would like to share with me offline, that is great. Because again, differences between league play and qualifying tournament play, I learned so much this season, and I'm very confident that Trevor's going to do a great job next year as well.
There was a ton of learning that happened this year. That's for sure.
Yes. And if you shared information in prior seasons, there is a tiny chance, or maybe a significant chance, that it did not necessarily get shared. And so if you can nicely reshare it, we would appreciate that.
I have a request for, I guess I don't remember the date of the tournament, but the Neo Titan games that was in Brookfield. That was a really fun qualifier, and it was meant for junior and newer teams. And we just happened upon it, like by happenstance. We didn't know, and had I known it was for newer teams, would have brought the entire Brown County coalition down, because this would have been perfect. So if we have more like it next year, 2 tournaments that are made for, newer teams, please advertise it clearly so we can, make sure that we're out there, especially for our 7th graders that are really intimidated in a normal qualifier.
Good to know. Okay.
Yeah, and from a judging perspective, we love that tournament. And if we're going to grow that much next year, we should have 2 for sure.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
I think, Renee, the criteria for rookies in that tournament also could have been clearer. because who is a rookie? So do all the teams who are rookies this year, next year again?
So
And if you look at
my definition of a rookie team isn't a single year. It goes until about from 1 to 3. And then like if it's a middle school oriented team, I mean that's also a whole conversation as well. So it does vary a little bit, but generally like that rookie team piece is fairly clear.
I think it's better to maybe spell it out and write it out as it's clearer, because I mean, no disrespect Ed from that perspective, but the two teams who qualified from the Winning Alliance and the Inspire both were in the state championship in the previous season as well.
Okay, that's helpful.
So
I don't think
No.
Yeah.
For Neo Titans, no, because
no,
What one
no,
was? It was my team.
Right.
No, and FSA Fire Truck too. They were rookies the previous year. They were in the state championship too.
Who was the other team?
Say Fire Truck. They were rookies in the previous year, but they
Green Eggs and Program.
Yeah, Green Eggs and Program was the other team.
No, Green Eggs and Program were the second one who qualified, but I think FSA was the Winning Alliance captain.
no. Well, Green Eggs was the Winning Alliance captain, and that was
Okay, yeah, sorry, my mistake.
state championship. We hosted the state championship last year, but we did not qualify for it. So when you guys came up to the state championship in Green Bay last year, we were the hosting team, but we didn't qualify.
Yeah.
We cheered on.
I mean, and Turtle Tech just made it in on the criteria, but again, based on like the ages of the teams and looking at that 1 to 3 time frame. So.
And we won't, if you do it again, we're not going to go back to it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, but clear and written down and documented. Love that advice. That sounds great.
And again, we showed up. We didn't realize what we were signing up for until later. We didn't realize it was a rookie event. So that was part of it as well.
Yeah, I would say that it goes back to the communication about it as well. I didn't realize I was the one helping sign up for our team, and I was planning to sign up for Neo Titans, not realizing it was a rookie tournament. And then found out it was a rookie when a design for rookie, I think when they were doing the 3rd round, and then it was listed in the spreadsheet as a rookie tournament.
Okay. So, because we had tried to make sure that, like, because all the Google teams had to go to that, like, we put them in to go to that tournament. They had to essentially opt out if they weren't going to it. And so that was why we were like, well, we only have 12 designated Google grant teams. We have some additional space available, but that's fine. We'll work on that. I don't entirely know what the appetite is for those types of events, and I actually don't know if I'm even supposed to do it that way. But we'll just say it's all good because we did it and it worked.
And it was great. And we appreciate it and we want more.
Okay.
Especially for the 7th graders that are starting out, and then throw them in a tournament with, varsity FTC that have been doing this for 5 or 6 years, where they have crazy autonomous programs and, April tag relocation around the field. They just get so intimidated. And I think this would just put them at ease and just bring the fun into it, Usually it's the first tournament is really hard for new rookie teams, and this is just beautiful.
So maybe it makes sense to kind of have that intro qualifying tournament earlier in the year to really make sure that those teams are like preparing, and then encourage everyone to also attend another event. And so however many rookie teams or like however many teams that are needed to kind of get that first step for those middle school students is great. But I want them to see and be inspired by what could be once they're familiar with the process. So that does make sense. And we'll have to continue to think about how that might work, like if I'm controlling the Google Grant team schedule, just, saying this is what it has to be as you enter the program versus like, again, now that you're in your second year, like that would be a little bit more open-ended. And then making sure the veteran teams know that Renee's doing crazy stuff in this background. We're gonna, put a little asterisk or some sort of star next to the events where Renee's doing weird stuff, and she swears that it's all on the up and up, and it's all for the sake of the kids. So
We have full autonomy over event preferencing, so there's nothing
fair.
nothing shady there.
Okay. All right. Good, very great advice and tips and suggestions and complaints. This is fantastic. Anything else? Okay, we will be back. Trevor, when are we going to be back?
Yeah, we're going to be back the week after champs.
Okay, we're going to be back the week after champs. We will bring along any celebratory, exciting, news, etc. that has come out that we're able to share with everyone. And then what I'd love to do, Trevor, is kind of gather the notes from this session, maybe take the transcript and have ChatGPT summarize it for us. And we can throw it in a blog and let people know that if they'd like to sign up for, kind of the additional recap post-championship and time to percolate on these thoughts, we'll have that information. They can RSVP. Sounds good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Make sure that you are signed up to our newsletter, and then also make sure you are checking the blog.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for your time.